recently I saw a really short interview with none other than Paddy the Baddy Pimblett, and he mentions the idea of being interested in possibly doing an influencer boxing match. And I think him mentioning this idea poses some really interesting questions. But first, let me show y'all what he had to say.
But you expect your future to be in the UFC?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, it goes without saying. I wouldn't want to go to a different organisation, lad. The UFC is the cream of the crop. It's the main, like, when you say to people I do MMA, most of them go, "What's that?" You know what I mean? Say, "Oh, UFC." People don't even know what MMA is, lads. But they know what UFC is. You never know, though. Some of these stupid YouTubers who are boxing could end up offering me millions to fight one of them. So we'll see what happens.
Oh yeah, you know, you've had your moment with Logan Paul, so who knows? Maybe this is the time.
So as you can see, he says it in like a joking manner, like he's not very serious. Also, earlier on in that interview, he was talking about fighting Renato Moicano after his fight at UFC 304 against Bobby Green. But this was brought up because his fight against Bobby Green is the last fight on his contract. So technically, he will be a free agent after that fight. And even though in my eyes he was clearly joking, I still think there's some merit to that. But that's only if the right fight comes along. And I only think there's one fight that Paddy Pimblett will take and can take that, in my opinion, I think he would definitely make more than enough money, and enough money will be brought to him on the table for him to turn away from the UFC for one boxing match and then attempt to come right back. I do not think it's Logan Paul. I do not think it's Jake Paul. I'm sure a lot of you can guess the name I'm about to drop, but of course it's going to be KSI. They're around the same weight. Of course, Paddy Pimblett cuts all the way down to 155, so that's much lower than where KSI boxes at. But let's be real, Paddy isn't going to take something like this seriously, so a fight with KSI would be huge over in the UK. Yeah, over here in America, it might not be all that big, especially after the whole thing with Paddy Pimblett and Jared Gordon. You know, I feel like after that whole situation, Paddy Pimblett kind of lost a lot of the fan base over in America. But you can't make the mistake thinking that America's the only place on the planet. You know, he's still absolutely massive over in the UK. He brings over that fan base over there. KSI brings over the YouTube type fan base. The fight would be freaking huge. And look, it would make sense on KSI's end because Paddy Pimblett, he's a huge name. He isn't even a striker, he's a jiu-jitsu guy. And he's gotten absolutely cracked in practically every fight he's been in. He's been dropped a few times also. So KSI with the size advantage and, in my opinion, the power advantage, I think it'll be a pretty good matchup for him. There's a clip going around that shows even KSI doesn't seem very enthusiastic about this fight he has coming up against Slim and Anthony Taylor.
I've actually, been working on a few tunes, but yeah, right now it's still boxing era. If it was up to me, it'd be very different. Right now is boxing era. It's annoying. I can't say too much, but yeah, it's not always up to me. Even at this stage, even at my old age of 31.
So a fight card with him and Paddy Pimblett as the main event in the UK, they could stack the card. I'm sure it would be massive. The only downside to this, and I think is the problem if Paddy Pimblett were to do this, is how much money is he going to get paid? Because it's got to be some type of generational wealth, because if he goes in there against someone like KSI and loses, it's just so bad business for the UFC. If I was anyone in the UFC, I probably wouldn't even bring him back if he were to lose, because it's just a really bad look. I understand, from a fighter's standpoint, you're looking at it like, oh, it's a boxing match, that's MMA, it's completely different, the skill sets are completely different, and you'd be right. But to the casual fan base, which is the majority of the fan base that watches these fights, they're not gonna see it that way. And like I said, it's just bad business, it's a bad look. But I would be lying to you if I told you that Paddy Pimblett versus KSI wouldn't be a huge draw over there in the UK. I'm sure they could easily sell out the O2 Arena and do really good on pay-per-view. But I thought this was a really interesting topic because I wanted to get y'all opinions on all of this. What do you think about a possible UFC fighter turning away from the UFC to take a big paycheck like that in a boxing match against an influencer and then trying to turn back around and come back to the UFC? Would you think doing something like that is a good idea, a bad idea? Like I said, I don't think he was serious. I don't think he'll actually do it, but he's the one that brought it up, so there's got to be some truth to it. Feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. As always, I thank you all so much for the support, and I'll catch you in the next video.